At my birthday, my dad walked in, looked at me, and asked, "Did that $40,000 for college tuition serve you well?" I froze. All I felt was anger and betrayal. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Clara, I'm 25, and I've always tried to be independent. My dad, Richard, promised to pay for college, but I later found out he had spent all my tuition money on his own personal projects. I had no help, no explanation, and no apology. I had to work part-time jobs for years just to finish school. I felt invisible, unappreciated, and deeply hurt. When he asked me that question at my birthday, I realized he had no idea how much I had struggled. I decided I wouldn't show him my anger right away. Instead, I focused on myself. I worked harder, saved money, and built my career quietly. By the time I was 24, I had a good job, my own apartment, and financial independence. He thought I was still struggling, but I was thriving. Then I planned my moment. On a small family dinner, I calmly explained how I had paid for college myself and showed evidence of how he spent my money. He was speechless. The people around us could see the truth. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, proud, finally free from his control. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. The betrayal that once broke me became the fuel that made me stronger. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone, it's living well and showing them you don't need them to succeed. I grew up in a family that seemed fine on the outside, but I always felt invisible. People assumed I had everything I needed, but the truth was different. My dad, Richard, promised he would pay for college, saying it was my future and his responsibility. I trusted him completely. What I didn't know was that he had other plans. Instead of saving the money for me, he used it to gamble on risky business deals that never made sense. Every time I asked about tuition, he would smile and reassure me, while secretly spending what should have been mine. My mom, Elaine, had left years before, so I didn't have anyone to explain what was happening. No one to guide me, no one to protect me. I had to figure out everything on my own, which made me feel even more alone. I refused to let the situation stop me. I picked up part-time jobs, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, working long hours just to pay my tuition. I had to hide it from my dad because I didn't want him to know I was covering what he had promised. I felt both frustrated and determined. Every late night I spent studying after work, every paycheck I carefully saved, reminded me of how unfair things were. But it also taught me resilience. I realized I could rely only on myself. What started as disappointment slowly became strength. I wasn't just surviving, I was building the life I deserved, even without my dad's support. That period of my life shaped me. I learned that betrayal can either break you or make you unstoppable. For me, it became the fire that pushed me forward. My 25th birthday was quiet. I invited only a handful of close friends and a few distant relatives. I didn't want a big celebration, just a peaceful evening surrounded by people who truly cared. Then, without warning, my dad, Richard, appeared at the door. He hadn't been invited, and I could see the smug look on his face immediately. He acted as if he owned the room, smiling like nothing was wrong. As soon as he approached me, he said the words that hit like a knife, "Did that $40,000 for college tuition serve you well?" His tone was mocking, as if he thought he was clever. Every word reminded me of the years I struggled alone, paying for my education while he pretended to support me. I froze for a moment, feeling all the frustration and hurt I had buried over the years rise to the surface. Memories of long nights juggling jobs, the exhaustion, and the fear of falling behind came rushing back. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but I didn't. Instead, I held my composure. I let him see me standing there, calm yet unshaken, while inside, the anger burned fiercely. My friends noticed my expression, they could sense my silent rage. I didn't have to explain, it was written all over my face. That night, I realized something important. I didn't need his validation or recognition. His words couldn't define me. Every sacrifice I had made, every challenge I had overcome, was mine, and no condescending remark could take that away. I let the moment pass, storing my strength for the day I would show him exactly what I had achieved on my own. During my sophomore year of college, I decided to check my bank account, expecting to see the tuition money my dad promised. Instead, I found a fraction of what should have been there. My stomach sank, and my hands shook. Confusion quickly turned into dread. I searched for answers, asking my parents, but they offered nothing. No explanation, no apology, just vague reassurances that made no sense. I felt abandoned, left to figure out why the funds were gone. Slowly, I started digging through old documents, bank statements, and receipts. Piece by piece, the truth became clear. My dad, Richard, had never set aside the money. The funds I had relied on to finish my education were gone, spent elsewhere without my knowledge. He had pretended to support me while I was left to scramble and find a way on my own. The realization hit me harder than anything before. I had been working multiple jobs, skipping sleep, and sacrificing everything to pay for school. I had carried the weight alone while he acted as though he had been there for me. The betrayal cut deep, anger, hurt, and disappointment mixing into a heavy ache I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust shattered and promises broken. Every late night I spent studying, every paycheck I saved, every exhausted morning I endured, it was all mine, earned without his help. And yet, he had the audacity to appear proud of me, as if he had played a part in my achievements. That moment changed everything. I understood that my success couldn't come from him, only from myself. The pain of betrayal became a fuel, a silent fire that pushed me to prove that I could rise above his deception. After I discovered the truth about my dad, I knew confronting him impulsively wouldn't help. Anger alone couldn't fix anything, and I didn't want him to see me broken. I needed a plan, one that would give me power over my own life. I decided to focus entirely on myself. I started mapping out how I could become completely independent, financially and personally. Every choice I made, from saving money to taking extra shifts, was part of a quiet strategy to prove I didn't need him. For the first time, I cut off any reliance on my father. I stopped sharing my struggles with him and refused to depend on his support for anything. Even small things, like asking for advice or financial guidance, I handled on my own. The feeling of control was new and intoxicating. I let the betrayal fuel me instead of holding me back. Every setback, every reminder of what he had taken from me, became motivation to work harder and smarter. I was determined not just to survive, but to thrive. I started investing my earnings carefully, planning for a future where I could stand without him in any part of my life. I wanted to be untouchable by his influence. It wasn't about revenge and anger, it was about showing strength through independence. With every small victory, my confidence grew. I wasn't just reclaiming what he had withheld, I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. The betrayal that once felt crushing became the driving force behind my determination, shaping me into someone who could face the world without fear. For the first time, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove to myself that I could succeed without any help. I landed a job as a software developer at a small but promising startup. The work was demanding, but I loved the challenge. Every line of code I wrote felt like a step toward independence. I carefully managed my finances, saving as much as I could from every paycheck. I learned about investments, taking small but smart risks that steadily grew my savings. By the time I was 24, I was fully self-reliant. I had an apartment of my own, a stable career, and enough money to feel secure. Throughout this time, I kept my achievements private. My dad still believed I was struggling, still assumed I needed him in some way. I never corrected him. Watching him underestimate me, thinking I depended on him, gave me a quiet satisfaction I didn't yet act on. But I wasn't just hiding my success for ego. I was preparing. I wanted the perfect moment to show him what I had accomplished on my own. I wanted him to see, without a doubt, that I didn't need his money, his guidance, or his approval. Every day, my independence strengthened me. I was no longer the person who worried about tuition or relied on promises that would never be kept. I was building a life that belonged entirely to me, and each achievement brought me closer to the day I would finally reveal the truth. The betrayal that had once left me bitter now fueled my determination. I was creating a reality where I had the power, the success, and the confidence that my dad had never given me. Soon, he would see everything. Even after I had built my life, my dad, Richard, couldn't resist putting me down whenever we ran into each other. Small remarks, disguised as jokes or advice, were meant to remind me of my place. At first, it was frustrating, but I stayed calm. Sometimes, friends would casually bring up my recent achievements. They mentioned promotions, projects I had led, or successes I had quietly celebrated. Each time, I noticed the flicker of embarrassment cross my dad's face. He tried to recover, smirking and pretending to understand, but I could tell he was shaken. He had no idea how much I had accomplished behind the scenes. I realized these encounters could serve a purpose. Instead of reacting with anger, I began paying closer attention. I listened carefully when he talked about his work, his investments, or his plans. Every careless word gave me insight into his financial situation, his mistakes, and the areas where he was vulnerable. It became a game of observation. I could see how overconfident he had become, how blind he was to his own mismanagement. Each meeting, each offhand comment, revealed more about the man who had once controlled me. I didn't confront him yet. I didn't need to. Gathering this knowledge quietly gave me power. I could plan without being noticed, prepare my next steps with precision. His arrogance was giving me the tools I needed for the moment I would finally turn the tables. The more he belittled me, the stronger I became. His hubris was his weakness, and I was ready to use it to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every smirk, every condescending remark, was fuel for the plan I had been quietly crafting. I found out that my dad, Richard, was getting involved in a new business venture. It sounded exciting on the surface, but the more I listened, the more I realized it was risky, reckless even. He had no idea how unstable the plan really was, and I could see it leading to financial trouble if left unchecked. Instead of confronting him directly, I decided to act quietly. I studied the situation, reviewing documents, financial statements, and legal records. I consulted experts under the guise of curiosity, not letting him suspect that I was protecting myself. I made sure that any potential connection to me was untouchable, so he couldn't use me as a shield or manipulate my resources in his schemes. It was satisfying to work behind the scenes. I didn't have to raise my voice or argue. Every careful step I took strengthened my control over the situation. I was no longer just reacting to his mistakes, I was preparing, anticipating, and outmaneuvering him without him ever realizing it. Patience became my ally. I mapped out his liabilities, noting weaknesses in contracts, overlooked debts, and areas where the venture might collapse. Every detail I uncovered made me feel more confident that when the time came, I could act decisively. This wasn't about revenge through confrontation yet. It was about securing my own position, ensuring that his recklessness would never hurt me again. I felt powerful, calm, and in command, knowing that I had outsmarted him before he even understood what was happening. For the first time, I felt the full satisfaction of turning betrayal into strategy. I wasn't just surviving, I was gaining control in ways he would never see coming. I decided it was time to bring my dad, Richard, into a situation he wouldn't expect. I invited him to a small dinner, calling it a celebration of my recent achievements, while pretending it was a gesture of reconciliation. He accepted, smug and confident, thinking he still held influence over me. I spent days preparing quietly. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find, documents showing how he mismanaged funds, bank statements proving he had used my tuition money for his own purposes, and notes detailing his risky ventures. Each paper was a piece of the truth that had been hidden for years. The dinner was intimate. Only a few friends and family were present, unaware of the tension that simmered beneath the surface. Their presence made everything feel normal to him, giving me the perfect stage for what was coming. I maintained my composure, smiling politely, acting as though I wanted nothing more than to enjoy the evening. Inside, my mind was racing. Every glance, every word, every pause was calculated. I was holding back the storm that had been building inside me for years, letting him underestimate me completely. He spoke casually, making jokes and assuming control of the conversation, while I listened, quietly observing his arrogance. I could feel the power shifting subtly, even though he didn't notice. My calm demeanor masked the storm within, the anger and hurt that had fueled me, now transformed into strategy. That night, the tension was electric. Every moment brought me closer to the point where I would reveal everything, where the truth would finally come to light. He had no idea what was waiting for him, and that made every second more satisfying. As the dinner progressed, I waited for the right moment. Then, quietly, I began presenting the documents I had gathered over the months. One by one, I laid out the evidence, statements showing how my dad, Richard, had used the $40,000 meant for my education on personal luxuries and failed projects. I spoke calmly, each word measured, letting the papers speak for themselves. I explained how I had managed to cover my tuition entirely on my own. I detailed the jobs I had worked, the scholarships I had earned, and the careful investments I had made to keep myself afloat. I didn't raise my voice or demand attention, I let the truth shine through naturally. The reaction was immediate. Richard froze, the smugness gone, replaced by disbelief and panic. His mouth opened and closed, searching for an excuse, but nothing came out. The people around us were equally stunned. Friends and relatives looked at him with new eyes, realizing for the first time the reality of what had happened. The room was silent for a moment, heavy with tension. It wasn't just about money, it was about broken trust, deception, and years of pretending. I felt a strange mix of relief and empowerment, knowing that I had revealed the full extent of his betrayal in a way he couldn't deny. I kept my expression calm even as my heart pounded. This was the climax of years of patience, resilience, and careful planning. The man who had tried to belittle me, who had taken what was mine and pretended to help, was finally exposed. The weight of his lies and false pride now rested openly in front of everyone, and I finally felt the satisfaction of truth being recognized. After I presented the evidence, my dad, Richard, stammered, trying to defend himself. He offered explanations, half-truths, and excuses, attempting to minimize the damage and shift blame. But I didn't flinch. I listened, calm and composed, letting his words reveal his arrogance rather than covering for him. Those around us could see it clearly. Friends and relatives who had once seen him as confident now noticed the hypocrisy in every sentence he spoke. His tone, once commanding, now sounded desperate and hollow. The arrogance that had once intimidated me was unraveling before everyone's eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry or beg for recognition. Instead, I stood firm, letting my calm presence speak louder than any argument. My silence became a statement, proof that I had risen above his manipulation, that I no longer needed his approval to define my worth. The more he tried to justify himself, the clearer it became to everyone how much he had failed me. I watched as his attempts to charm and excuse were met with disbelief from the people he wanted to impress. It was a quiet, yet undeniable exposure of his deceit and self-interest. For the first time in years, I felt truly acknowledged. I didn't need him to apologize or make amends, seeing the truth recognized by others was enough. The emotional weight of betrayal lifted slightly, replaced by a deep sense of empowerment. That night, I realized the full power of composure and dignity. I had faced years of dishonesty and manipulation, and finally, I stood unshaken. I was seen, respected, and above all, in control. After the dinner, I made a decision that felt liberating. I cut every financial connection with my dad, Richard. There were no joint accounts, no shared responsibilities, no chance for him to interfere in my life again. It was a clear boundary, and for the first time, I felt truly free from his control. I didn't seek to destroy him. I didn't want revenge that would ruin his life. Instead, I let the truth speak for itself. His reputation, already shaken in front of friends and family, naturally reflected the consequences of his own actions. Watching him face the quiet judgment of those around him, I felt a sense of satisfaction that no confrontation could have matched. It wasn't about money or pride anymore. The real victory was reclaiming my independence and dignity. For years, I had carried the weight of his deception silently, letting it fuel my determination. Now, that burden was gone. I had established my life on my own terms, and the feeling of control was powerful. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I didn't need his recognition, his apologies, or his approval. The anger that had driven me for years had been replaced by confidence and calm. I could finally enjoy the life I had built, knowing it was entirely mine, free from manipulation or interference. That moment was transformative. I realized that the truest form of revenge isn't to harm someone else, it's to rise above their deceit and prove, quietly and strongly, that you are unstoppable. I had done that, and the sense of empowerment was something I would carry forever. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm I had earned through hard work and perseverance. I celebrated my accomplishments quietly, without fanfare, but with a deep sense of pride. Every milestone, every success, was a testament to my effort and resilience. Looking back, I realized that the betrayal I had suffered didn't destroy me. In fact, it became the force that shaped my determination. The obstacles, the lies, and the disappointment had pushed me to develop strength I might never have discovered otherwise. Each challenge became a lesson, each setback a step toward independence and self-reliance. I often thought about the people who had underestimated me, particularly my dad, Richard. Their doubts and dismissals no longer held any power over me. Watching myself grow beyond their expectations was the most profound form of satisfaction. Success, calm, and control had replaced the frustration and anger I once carried. To anyone listening to my story, I want you to remember this: the most effective revenge isn't about punishment, it's about thriving in ways those who doubted you never imagined. Focus on your goals, strengthen your skills, and build a life that is untouchable by others' manipulation or betrayal. I had learned to trust my own judgment, rely on my own effort, and rise above deceit. The journey had been painful, but it was also empowering. I now approach life with clarity, confidence, and the knowledge that true strength comes from within. Betrayal taught me resilience, independence, and patience. And in embracing those lessons, I found not just revenge, but freedom, fulfillment, and the unshakable assurance that I could overcome anything life threw my way. Do you think I was right to cut my dad off, or should I have given him another chance? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.